It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, sport, showbiz and beyond. Tonight, one of the best known and most respected and experienced politicians of his generation, the former Conservative Home Secretary and leader of the Conservative Party, who held cabinet positions under John Major and Margaret Thatcher, Lord Michael Howard, the Right Honourable, the Lord Howard of Lyme. Welcome to the show, sir.
Lim.
I knew I'd fall at the last hurdle. I've been practising that all day, but not well enough. Quite a fancy title, isn't it?
Well, Lim is the village we live in Kent, and part of my former constituency. So it seemed the obvious choice of place.
Yep, and I'm now never safe visiting Lim. Let's be clear about that, not without armed security. You have had quite the career. Why politics, Michael? Because you could have made a fortune in industry.
I'm not sure I could have in industry. I might have been able to make a bit of money if I'd stayed at the bar. Because politics gives you the greatest opportunity to make a difference, to help create a better society. And I desperately wanted to try and give something back to this wonderful country which has been so good to me and my family.
And what was it about your upbringing that made you a Conservative?
Well, my parents ran a small business, and I could see the connection between hard work and enterprise and the need for reward. I was never tempted by socialism. So they were never conservatives, actually, until I got active in conservative politics. But I think the values which they lived by were conservative values.
And therefore, were there any formative experiences that shaped your politics? I mean, why didn't you fancy socialism at that time?
Because it's never really worked, has it? It's been tried and it's never really worked. And it seems to me that the real difference to how a society works springs from the effort and enterprise of individuals. And we have to encourage that effort and enterprise, and that's absolutely crucial.
You became an iconic Home Secretary, which was, I guess, a career high point at a very important time for the history of this country.
Well, we've had many high points and not so high points, and I was very privileged to have that opportunity.
A tough, no-nonsense Home Secretary.
Well, it was quite interesting because I'd never expected to be Home Secretary. And so I went into the job with a completely open mind and spent the first few weeks, months really, listening, especially listening to police officers. I spent a lot of time in police canteens because they're the people who are in the front line of maintaining law and order. And a lot of what I did over the next 4 years was a result of what I'd learned during that period of listening.
93 to 97. What kind of a leader, what kind of a Prime Minister was John Major?
John Major let me get on with things. I could count on the fingers of one hand the number of times where he might have asked a question or asked to chat to me about something or other. He was, in my area at least, he was hands-off. He let me get on with things, and I had no problem. I hope he didn't have any problem with me.
And it was a bumpy time for that Conservative administration, wasn't it, economically and the rest?
It was, and it was a bumpy time for me in the Home Office because I was trying to change so many things which had been there for quite a while. And if you try and change things, you meet resistance because there are a lot of vested interests, people who think things should carry on being done as they've always been done. So it was a tough time, but I was determined to do what I could to start bringing crime down. I was told when I went there that was something that was impossible, that they showed me a graph which showed that crime had gone up at an average of about 5% a year for the last 50 years, and they said to me, the first thing you must realise, Home Secretary, is that there's nothing you can do about it. And I didn't take that advice, and I was determined to try and change things so that crime did come down, and it did.
And useful that you were a lawyer, that you had experience and understanding of the criminal justice system.
It helped.
And what about those forces of resistance against you? Was that an early example of the blob?
It certainly wasn't called that then. I never heard that word until decades later. And it wasn't so much the civil servants, to be fair, because I think if a minister is clear about what he wants to do and determined to do it, and sets about it in the right way, the civil service will do their best to do what the minister wants. So I wouldn't class the civil service, except at the beginning. At the beginning it was difficult, but after a while the forces of resistance were outside the civil service.
You became Secretary of State for Employment in 1990, and of course Margaret Thatcher was the outgoing Prime Minister. We'll never see the like of her again, will we?
We won't. She wasn't outgoing when I became Secretary of State for Employment, but she did leave 10 or 11 months later. I was a great supporter of hers. I was very privileged to serve in her cabinet, and I think she was a great Prime Minister. Now, obviously, views vary on that divisive topic.
And recollections vary.
Recollections vary too, yes. But I thought she was a great Prime Minister.
Clearly a transformative figure, 3 landslide election victories, an economic success story, and, of course, a war that she won in the Falklands. Did she lose her golden touch towards the end, would you say?
Yes, to some extent.
Did you see that? Did you witness that at first hand?
You could see it. I think a lot of people thought she would retire after 10 years, and I think that's what Dennis wanted her to do. And I think that would have been the wise thing to do. And if she'd done that, her reputation would, I think, have been enhanced. I think when you've been Prime Minister for that length of time, it becomes more difficult, perhaps, to listen to the views of others, which she'd always been rather good at, and to temper your own instincts by testing them against the arguments of others, again, which she'd been very good at, less good at in the last period.
I don't want to be disrespectful to her memory, but was there an extent to which she lost her marbles slightly towards the end?
I don't think so, no, I wouldn't say that. Towards the end of her life, of course, she did suffer from that sort of thing, but not when she was Prime Minister, not that I saw.
No, and a colossal work ethic even towards the end.
Oh, amazing, yes.
Yeah, and is it true that she was head of every department, that she knew everyone's brief inside out?
Pretty much, yes. I remember once she asked me around for a drink in Prime Minister's office in the House of Commons, and I was about to take responsibility for a bill that she had asked me to take through Parliament, and we'd produced a document. And I tried to mug it up as best I could, but she said to me, "Now, Michael, this footnote on page 58, what exactly does that mean?" And I'm afraid I didn't have the first idea.
You were nonplussed.
What it meant.
Michael, an email has come in, and this is lots of emails saying they want you to be Prime Minister. You did have a crack at it.
They're 20 years too late.
You did reverse Labour's lead.
We
in 97.
halved Labour's majority in 2005.
2005, that was it. That was
the election.
Yeah,
But
you made inroads, didn't you? And
enough.
You paved the way for David Cameron.
You don't fight an election to halve the other side's majority. You fight an election to win.
For sure.
We didn't.
No.
We did make progress.
Did you enjoy being leader of the Conservative Party?
It was very hard work. Very, very demanding. Full on, 24 hours a day. But I was very lucky in one respect. We didn't really have social media then. And I'm very pleased we didn't.
Do you think you took one for the team being leader of the Tories then? Because I just think that was a time when the Conservatives were always going to be out of power. And as I've mentioned, you did reverse that decline.
Well, I don't think I'd put it quite that way. I was there. I came in at quite a low ebb for the party. And I was there to try and bring things together and put us in a place where even if we couldn't win my election, we might be able to win the one after that, which is, of course, what happened. Yeah,
you paved the way for David Cameron. Did you advise David Cameron when he became leader of the party?
I don't think he needed my advice. David knew what he had to do and knew how to do it, and did very well.
I've got an email here, and it's from, let me have a look, who has asked this. I'll get the name shortly, but a couple of people are asking, what was your appraisal of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister?
Boris is a most remarkable man with phenomenal gifts and abilities. And he achieved some great things when he was Prime Minister. He got Brexit done. He was Prime Minister. I think Rishi Sunak deserves a lot of the credit for the furlough scheme and the way we got through the pandemic. But Boris was Prime Minister, was entitled to credit for that. He was absolutely first in line to support Ukraine, and deserves enormous credit for that. So a lot of things he did, he deserves a lot of credit for. But as we know, he had his flaws. And his faults, and in the end, they were his undoing.
Was he dishonest with you when he served under you as party leader?
Not with me personally, no.
So that's a straight answer to a straight question. What about the current incumbent then? Rishi Sunak is now the Prime Minister. What's your view of him?
I'm a huge supporter of Rishi Sunak. I think we're very lucky to have him as Prime Minister. We're in a tough spot as a country. The pandemic, the war in Ukraine, all these things present really formidable challenges for us. And I think that Rishi is absolutely the best person to navigate us through those challenges. I think he's a brilliant man, very conscientious and hardworking, and I really do think we're very lucky to have him.
And what needs to happen for the Conservatives in order to reverse that Labour lead? Can it be done? Is it insuperable?
No, it's not insuperable, and it can be done. Let me paint a picture of what might happen, what I hope will happen, obviously. In a year's time, it's highly likely that inflation will be coming down pretty significantly. I hope that interest rates will be coming down. I hope the economy will be recovering. And I think Rishi will be able to say to people, we've been through a very tough time. We've all had to make sacrifices, but we're coming through it. And now is the time to reap the rewards of those sacrifices. Don't throw it away and don't let Labour ruin it. Now, whether that pitch will succeed in 2024 or whenever it will be, I don't know. But I think there's a reasonable prospect that may be the case.
Smart money might be on a May 2024 poll or perhaps October. It's unlikely they'll stretch it to January 25, do you think?
I have no idea.
No. I mean, you wouldn't want to be a hostage to fortune if you were leader at that point, would you?
No, you wouldn't. But, you've got a lot of things to weigh.
Nice to have the option, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, John Major did take it to the wire pretty well in 1997.
And what about immigration? Sometimes in the summer, when the water is calm, upwards of 1,000 people entering the country illegally via the channel. It's a big job of work for Suella Braverman. This week, Rishi Sunak has announced his 5-point plan, including a deal with Albania to return Albanians. Is that enough? What would you be doing?
I hope that'll be enough. I think it's a good package. I hope it will be enough. The one way in which you could put an end to this traffic is to have an agreement with France that they take everyone back. And actually, we had such an agreement with France when I was Home Secretary. And they did take everyone back. Now, it may be a bit of a challenge to put that agreement in place. I think it is actually still in place nationally, but it's obviously not being enforced. And if you could do that, then it's to France's advantage, because once the people who go to France in order to get into the UK realise that is not a route, they might stop going into France. And it's not really in France's interest to have the camps in Calais and all the rest of it. But whether that can be revived, I don't know.
You're a top lawyer. The clock's against us. What about chucking out the European Convention on Human Rights? Would that help? Is it possible? Is it a good look for Britain?
It's possible. It's not necessarily a good look and not necessarily a good thing. It's
Has it been overstated by some on the Tory right, do you think, as a solution?
It's very difficult. We looked at it when we were in government and under John Major. And it was pointed out to us that the only people at that stage, at any rate, who'd left the European Convention on Human Rights were the Greek colonels, which wasn't entirely a precedent that we wanted to follow.
Can Brexit be a success? Will it be?
Oh, I think so. You have to take into account the problems we've encountered in the last couple of years since Brexit. I've already mentioned the pandemic, the war in Ukraine. These would have presented us with formidable problems whether we were in the European Union or not. But at a given time, we will be in control of our own affairs. That's the bottom line. And of course we can make a success of it. We're a great country. I think we've got a great future.